Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Ryan Heckman, the CEO of Rallyday Partners, and this is the Founders Journey podcast. We'll explore the heart and soul of great founders and their journey to build the company of their dreams. You will learn about new industries and business models while discovering how to apply the founder's mindset to your everyday work and life. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Founders Journey podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Heckman, coming to you from Denver, Colorado. I just asked, this is not our first podcast for our season 3, 2026. It's actually our second, but it's the first one I will have recorded in this new year. And I bring it up just because it's like such a cool time for us in the business community where we get like a new 9 if you play golf, or the new half if you're a football player. It just feels like a bunch of renewal and a lot of new energy, and we haven't screwed anything up yet. I'm looking at our guest, Tony Ogg, who is the CEO and founder of Nimble Gravity, which was the third platform company in Rallyday's Fund 2. We closed, Tony, was it December of 24 when we closed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 23rd of December.
Great timing, right before Christmas, I suppose.
I think that was part of the goal. Yeah.
I give everyone a breather. And before this recording, I asked Tony if we could have a bit of fun on this podcast, which he wholeheartedly said, of course. But I have to tell a little story. First of all, Tony is like big time tech guy. Okay, so Tony was the CTO at a very large company called Aero Electronics, founded and run by a guy named Michael Long, kind of a legend here in the city of Denver in the state of Colorado. And Tony's been on the frontier and on the edge of all things digital engineering and AI for his entire life. And so if you were to have Exhibit A anywhere that said, who's the tech guy, this is the guy. And Tony's been in our office probably, I don't know, a dozen times in the last 12 months. He kind of lives nearby. And he and I have spoken like zero. And I don't know, for some reason, I have found Tony to be a little intimidating to me, which doesn't happen very often, but he is. And part of my goal for this hour that we are together is to get to know Tony on a deeper level, because I just haven't done so yet. And everybody on the deal team that works with him loves him to death. And I know very little about Tony. So this will truly be a founder's journey today. And I welcome you all who have joined us. And I welcome you, Tony. Thanks for being part of the Rallyday family. Thank you for your trust. Thank you for all the work that you do. And thank you for being here today on what I hope is just an awesome hour of connection with one another.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Well, let's start with a little bit of your biography on your professional and personal life, and maybe starting with how you grew up and just some insights on the inside of Tony that we don't get to see very often as your private equity partner.
Yeah, happy to walk through that. So I grew up actually about an hour south of here in Colorado Springs in an educator household. So my dad started as a teacher in high schools, and he eventually became a guidance counselor. And my mom also worked in the schools, but her real passion was running a business. So she owned a quilting store selling, patterns and fabrics and these kind of things. And so I had the duopoly of taking a lot of SAT tests for practice at home from my dad, and being in the back office at age 7 or something, writing addresses and licking stamps on my mom's mailing list in her business. So that was kind of hopefully gives you a little bit of the context of how I grew up.
Brothers and sisters?
I have one younger sister who also lives close to here. She took the medicine track, so she's a physician's assistant and also an associate professor at a physician assistant school here in Denver also.
And if you had to say like the one or two qualities of your mom and your dad, and which mix of them you are today, what would those be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, if I was to put it into the mix, I'm very different than both of them. But if I was to take the sort of raw ingredients of the two of them. One would be my mom was very into things that she enjoyed doing and tried to turn it into a business. And my dad was into the part of the reason he chose education and particularly the guidance counselor route was like at 2 p.m. he was done for the day and he could, have the summers off, which is completely not like me at all. But, I think they were, as a home, it was, we encourage you to do whatever you want to go do and follow your own path and, do those kind of things, which was great. However, there were like along the lines, a lot of, we really want you to go to the Air Force Academy or to West Point. And the reason for that is my dad is a military guy and, he comes from this military family. And that level of like discipline of you have to do things a set way in, as a freshman, you have to walk on these certain squares in the Air Force Academy. I wanted the path where if I didn't think I needed to go to a class and I could still ace every exam, that was what I was going to do. Not like the level of, I have to lift my fork a certain specific way or I'm going to get berated by the upperclassmen. So it was kind of.
That didn't seem all that attractive when you were 16.
No, not at all. Not it was, and I ended up in a 2-week summer program for kids who seemed like they were going to get accepted there. I know that it's been forever ago, but I think it was like I just needed Romer's signature or something to say.
That's Governor Romer at the time.
Yeah, thanks. And so I went up there, and it was like not only it just wasn't a fit for me. So anyway, that was kind of the upbringing I had.
And I mean, just to flex a little bit on your behalf, but I mean, Nimble Gravity is a badass business in an industry called data engineering, called AI, whatever you want to call it. But it is a force of nature in this ecosystem of tech services. And Tony is a thought leader in this space, widely regarded on the speaking tour. And because it's AI, like everybody wants to talk to Tony. Okay. So there's that. Did you always love, I say, computers for lack of better word? And did you always lean that way, Tony? And how did you find your way into that field and find yourself today to be such a celebrity rock star person in this sector?
I appreciate the comment. I'm not sure I'm a rock star, but I'll take it.
He has a beard, by the way, that looks like ZZ Top. It's a little trimmer now than it usually is. Anyway, you know what I'm saying by that word.
So I've always liked understanding how things work. As a kid, I'd take apart like my remote control car to figure out how it worked. And like computer was this really interesting tool because I could go like understand, and it was an Apple II computer. And like how do you defeat the copy protection on this game so that you could share it with your other 12-year-old nerdy friends? So it was that kind of thing. But like always computers were this interesting tool. And then data became this, opportunity to help like understand how things worked. And, so it was always like what I did in my spare time for fun. And I was lucky enough to be able to turn that into a job and, leverage it throughout my whole career.
Where was your first job? And did you go, I'm sorry, but did you go to college for computer engineering or how'd that whole thing work?
Yeah. So I went EE, electrical engineering. Okay. And almost the whole time I was in the electrical engineering program, University of Colorado, it was, let's use computers to do this because it's so much easier and better and faster. But also let's go design a computer from scratch and, build the assembly code and all this sort of stuff. And the other thing that happened was I really fell in love with economics. And like there was a point where I was like, I told my parents, I really think I'm going to change my major. And I was almost done. And they were like, that's really dumb. You shouldn't do that. So I didn't do it. But the reason for that was like in engineering, there's just like no debate. There's no, it's just a 0 or 1. And in the economics class, we're all looking at the same data, but there were very different opinions about how to interpret this and this kind of thing. Yeah, and then as I progressed through that, I ended up with 2 internship offers. One was from a company, Colorado Springs, called SCI. It used to mean Spacecraft Incorporated, and they were doing hardware engineering and manufacturing of circuit boards and those kind of things. And the other one was Intel in Arizona. And I talked to a friend of mine, and he said, at Intel, you'll probably be doing the same thing forever. That you'll do the 8K thing and then the 16K thing. And he said this, contract engineering, manufacturing, hardware design sort of thing. Every day is a new day. You should go check that out. So I went there, and I started as an intern working on 3 10-hours a week. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Was it paid or?
It was paid. Yeah. Yeah. And before I graduated, they said, hey, we'd like to extend an offer to you and have you come on board. We were doing a lot of circuit board design for Hewlett Packard. They used to have a division in Fort Collins, and so as well as for Nortel Networks and kind of telco back then. This was 95, 96. So I worked there, and then I set up an internet server, and I built a customer portal, and I did all this sort of stuff just on my own over the course of years and years. And then we got bought in 2001 by another company called Sanmina, which was in effectively the same business. We were 2 billion combined, something like that, publicly traded. And they moved me to their headquarters in Silicon Valley later on to be sort of number 2 in the IT department. But the whole time it was, how do you take technology to solve problems so that I could do my day job more? The specific turning point in that journey was when you manufacture things, there's always some part that's late. And that's what's holding up this whole thing. And I went to her name's Gwenda in the supply chain team. And I said, how is it that components are always late? Don't you just call somebody and they send these things to you? And she said, I owe a lot to Gwenda. Instead of saying, go away, just leave it to us. She patiently walked me through the way MRP, supply demand works, and supply chains, and all these EDI signals and all this stuff. And she showed me this green screen system, like this old terminal thing that they use to buy these parts, and said, this is how it works. This is why the parts are late. And it was horrible. So in order to spend more time doing my hardware engineering job, over some weekend, and at this point I was full-time, over some weekend, I built a layer on top of this green screen to solve all these problems. And I showed it to Gwenda like 2 or 3 weeks later. Will this help? And really I was being self-serving so I could get the parts. And she said, this is amazing. And over the course of time, this thing I built as an engineer in one location ended up spreading and becoming the de facto purchasing system for this giant company. And the day I called the CIO to say, hey, can I hand this to you and you take this over because it's become my job, was the day I became an IT guy. Anyway, that was like solving a problem and turned into a product, and I think they still use it today.
That's unbelievable. Classic necessity is the mother of invention, both personally and within the company. And then from there, Tony, how many years were you at Arrow Electronics?
Yeah, I was there 9 years. So what happened there? So at the company Sanmina, from 2000 to 2006, I worked for a gentleman named Vin Melvin, and he was the CIO. And in 2006, he said, I'm leaving. I'm going to go to Arrow. And, these companies, like, I think they had a couple $100 million relationship. We were buying parts from them. And I said, okay, it sounds great. Let's stay in touch kind of thing. In 2007, I was part of a project to divest a unit of the Sanmina business to Hanhai. So I spent a year in the reverse diligencing kind of thing. And at the end of that, I had this opportunity to stay at Sanmina and do other things, or I was like, this is a really good time to go do something else. So I pitched Arrow. Effectively, it was, you're in the middle of this giant supply chain. You have thousands of suppliers, hundreds of thousands of customers. there's probably something in there to leverage the data and use the data and do, things. And here's my business case for this. You should hire me and a couple of friends of mine, and we'll take care of this for you, kind of thing. And Vin, listened patiently, and he said, "This is probably not a good time. We have other priorities." And that was 2008. It was
not a good time to
not
be
a good
pitching new
time.
stuff.
Yeah, so I went instead, and I started a internet startup with the same couple of friends, and we ended up incubating it in Boulder with the Techstars group. And then Arrow called me 2.5 years or so after that to say, "Now's the time." And it was effectively a position I was saying, "I think you should have this, and I think that would be part of it." And I didn't realize at the time they had a lot of early interest in similar types of things, but it was too early. It was like .com boom era, and this was time to come back and start to reinvest in some of those things. So that was when I started there in 2011, and I was there for 9 years.
Yeah, and on a scale of 1 to 10, how fulfilling was your time at Arrow during those 9 years? And when did you either get the courage or the other version, which is like, I'm annoyed working with this big company, I'm going to start my own company? Like, tell us about that transition and from Arrow, why you made it, and why you started Nimble Gravity.
At the beginning, it was 10 out of 10, like building something effectively from scratch, partially organically, partially via acquisition. And we were small enough that we could go do our own thing and no one cared. We weren't going to, change what they needed to guide the street, kind of thing. Super fun, building teams, building products, all that, super fun. And it was fun for probably, the first 4 or 5 years. It was super fun. And then we got big enough that we were material to the whole company. And so the level of, or the amount of time that we were spending explaining and trying to forecast things and versus actually working on moving the ball forward changed significantly. And it was, hey, you can no longer have your own special building and your own dress code. You need to come back to the headquarters and dress like everybody else. And, some of those kind of things made it a little less fun. And also, at that point we had built more or less everything that needed to be built, and it was running the thing. And it just wasn't as mentally exciting. So what happened was I started to do side consulting. It was very cautiously for firms that I knew Arrow would have no problem with me doing anything because they weren't even remotely in the same industry.
But you were moonlighting, Tony.
I was totally moonlighting. And it was stimulating, it was interesting. It was like every one of these projects was this new exciting thing. And they started to grow, and it was like, this was late 2019. So we incorporated Nimble Gravity in August of 19. And as 2020 got started, I was sitting in, it was February of 2020. I was in Revelstoke, sitting in an Airbnb. My friends are on the mountain enjoying themselves, and I'm negotiating what turned out to be very lucky set of business with a company that still makes disinfectant product, which then turned into like obviously what happened in early 2020 with the pandemic was a rocket ship. And I kind of was in a position where that could pay the bills, and so it was a bit of luck on that side. But that was, there was nothing left interesting for me to do at Arrow, and yeah, it was just became a thing. And at that point, just to like the next little part of the story was consulting was the thing I was doing until I figured out what I really wanted to do next. I'm going to have some product idea or something, and it was very much a lifestyle. How do I snowboard and mountain bike and then have this other thing that supports those hobbies? And it turned out I fell in love with consulting. It just from the breadth of different types of problems and different people we get to interact with. But it probably took like 8 months before this was the thing we're actually going to do. And it's not just the, fill in the gap until we've found a product idea or something.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Did you When did you actually name it and this variety of things you were doing, Nimble Gravity?
It was in 2019. So it was, one of the other co-founders really liked this name, Nimble 9.
Nimble 9?
Nimble 9.
And what was give us the story?
Just liked names with numbers in them. I have an allergy to names that I don't know how to type the domain for. So like, is it NINE? Is it the number 9? And I also didn't like, what happens when there's 10 of us? It's kind of this. So I said, Nimble's great though. Like I like the agility, and I really wanted to name a company something with Gravity Labs or something, because I like sports that involve gravity. So we just stuck the two of them together. We think it's memorable and quirky and unique. So that was the genesis.
I would say like the name does just evoke for me this feeling of fighting gravity with agility, or otherwise doing things differently and exploring possibility instead of trying to reach potential and these kinds of things. And when you guys did your rebranding, I don't know, was it like 6 months ago you guys did? It's so cool that you turn the eyes against each other. I thought that for me, when I saw that, I was like, well, that's how I feel. It's like this funny alternative universe that we get to live in at Nimble Gravity, where we get to create our own reality. And so it really speaks to me, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I love that. It's this. There's definitely this. They're not exactly polar opposite terms, but they definitely kind of elicit some feelings like that, and that's exactly where the eye, upside down eye, came from in the logo, as well as we have a very large presence in Spanish speaking countries, and when you have an exclamation mark in a sentence in Spanish, you precede the sentence with an upside down.
Oh, I've always seen that, and I've never asked why.
The beauty of it, and it's the same with questions, is that going into the sentence that you need to be excited about this, or that you need to think about this and enunciate it as a question. And I think it's a brilliant thing, and we should adopt it in English as well. But unfortunately, that's a little.
Yeah, it's like grammatically a provocateur of grammar. Well, that's really cool. See, I'm already learning stuff about this company that we've been partnered with for a year. Fascinating. Tell us a little bit about the business in a way. Nancy Phillips, our partner that we get to share together, who is, I think, one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met. And lucky for you, you get to work with Nancy and not me, because one, I'm so stupid when it comes to tech, and Nancy's, maybe not in your league, but in her own right, a tech thought leader. But she's also like super humble, and I have to brag for her. So whenever we introduce Nancy, she's like, "Yeah, I'm from Canada. Spent 3 years traveling the world, and I'm like a reluctant entrepreneur. Probably couldn't get a job anywhere, and I built this little business in Denver called ViaWest. And yeah, I kind of like started the first data center business, but not really. And then I sold that business as if it were like at a garage sale for $1.7 billion. And now I'm at Rallyday because I love working with other founders." That's her typical thing. And I always have to say, oh, yeah. And Nancy took her business from 0 of revenue to 119 million of EBITDA. And then I dropped the mic for her. And then, we continue. Give me a flex a little bit. So Nimble Gravity, you guys merged with a company called Fog Solutions back in July. But sitting here at the end of 2025, beginning of 26, give us the flex version, not the Nancy Phillips version, but brag a little about why Nimble Gravity is a badass business.
I'll try.
Please.
So today, 14th of January, 2026, is the least amount of data and AI use in the rest of our lifetime. It will never be less than it is today. And the ability for companies to harness this, and companies and organizations, is going to be as paramount to their survival and their growth as figuring out how to leverage steam or the lathe and these things during the Industrial Revolution. And I think there are very few companies that legitimately understand both the old world of how businesses work, as well as how to apply the technology to help companies move into that era in a way that isn't just about the tech, but it's also about process management, about org design, about the change management, the implications of these kind of things. And I think that that's really fun. So we have this amazing, like probably the biggest change in my lifetime, more than the internet and mobile and all these things. And we're part of it. And that's really exciting. And I think we've built the most amazing group of people through hiring and acquiring to go help companies do that. So it's super fun. I think we're poised for an amazing future based on that.
And you alluded to it, but I always brag about your LATAM infrastructure and just the quantity and quality of talent there that you can utilize with mostly North American clients where there's a scarcity of data science talent. Tell us, how you built that. And you're in, I think, was it Mexico, Colombia, and Argentina? And was like that, did you know that we were going to be short talent? And we're like, yeah, I need to build this stuff because someday we won't have enough of these very talented people in the United States.
Yeah, the Mexico was greenfield, and that was at Arrow and at Sanmina before Arrow. We had built teams of people, and in fact, some of the people from the 1990 era Sanmina team came to Arrow with us. One guy also came to Nimble Gravity. So it was what we knew. It was how do you go get access to talent? You develop these relationships and so forth. So it was kind of you do what you know for Mexico. And then it was, we're going to grow through acquisition. Where are we going to be able to go tap into companies that have interesting use cases, industries, leadership of people, skills that we need to grow? LATAM was going to be where we would do all those things. And we started looking for opportunities, and we did the first one of those was a company called MDevs in Buenos Aires, and it was a try before you buy kind of scenario. So we were circa a quarter of their revenue as a subcontract kind of situation, and amazing work ethic, amazing capabilities. And it just made sense. And then we looked in Colombia and we acquired in 2023 that company. And then, with Rallyday back in August, it was Fog. And Fog was the first US acquisition for us. Similarly around leadership and talent and access to markets, as well as, they have a really, really strong Microsoft and Databricks relationship as well.
Which of the work broadly in your field has a significant market share for quote unquote the stuff that you do, as I understand it, between Microsoft and Databricks?
Yeah, I like to say we pick winners in the tech space, and you could do anything with those more or less. They're just great companies to work with, and they make great products. So it's been fun to partner with them.
And prior to Fog, you would have said you were technology agnostic, and now that's a claim that is a strength. The counterclaim is a strength. Did you have to, I guess, intellectualize changing your business model at that time to get the benefit of those platform relationships, or was that easy, no-brainer for you?
I still would contend we're platform agnostic. And what we are is pro-customer. And what we're going to do is the right thing for the customer. And the scenario with Microsoft and with our friends at Databricks are when the customer has not already chosen something and they need our input and advice on what to put in place. Those are what we're going to recommend because they're great. We know them really well, and they're going to solve whatever problems you can throw at them. So that's the way I would articulate that. And we're not going to go into a Microsoft shop and recommend them pull that out. There's no reason ever to do that. So that's how I would articulate that.
Yeah, I may add a PS to what you just said insofar as it wasn't intellectually challenging for you because you believe in their products inherently.
Yeah, to the point, and this may be the sort of, here's a nerdy example for you, Ryan. So, we're in the process of training our folks on a couple of specific generative AI capabilities in and around Databricks. And we're having these conversations of how long will it take to build build a curriculum and get people certified. And over the holidays, things were a little quiet. So I went, I got one of these certifications as a like the hands-on way that I'm going to learn and do this. And part of the reason was like, I really think it's a great problem. Like I think like I'm that involved in this stuff. And as I'm going through, like, this is really cool. I'm like,
I have to say, I'll make up a story that I think that's not a nerdy story, although it is, and you are kind of a nerd. You just are. But I also think it's because the snowboarding absolutely sucked during the holidays, and you probably were like, well, if I'm going to do it, low opportunity cost.
yeah, I mean that like in my lifetime living here, it's the worst. And it's a little depressing, right? Like I'm sure you feel the same way. So yeah, I'm gonna use my time, and that was how I chose to spend.
How cool. I mean, when the CEO and founder is certifying him or herself and in an ability to teach their people how to do something better in an emerging field that requires this of you, that is a founder story. I love.
It was fun. I think it was a good use of my time.
All right. Well, let's go from Nimble Gravity kind of origin and philosophy. Well, I'll ask a more pointed question. How would you compare yourself to McKinsey or Anderson or Accenture, rather, like the big names that neophytes like me might consider, kind of famous versions of you? Do you compete against those guys? Do you win, and why? And why do you think you're so good at what you do?
We do compete, and it tends to be a discussion with the CXO of the decision maker in a company. Of they don't say it this way, but this is kind of no one's going to get fired for hiring McKinsey. They might get fired for hiring us if we don't do a good job. But it's on the MBB, if I can call them that side, McKinsey, Bain, BCG. It's really sharp business school graduates. And on our side, it's literally gray hair, scar tissue, people who have messed up a factory and had to send people home on buses kind of stuff, So that's the difference. I think there's also, an empathy for the problem and for helping the company that's maybe a little different than you buy a pod of people and they're going to help you kind of thing. I also think, like, and I've heard this a couple of times, I think a lot of times companies get hired to help reinforce a pre-existing opinion with research and data and so forth.
And a logo.
And this is what's going to help us get it through the gauntlet to approval. And I think we tend to get invited to do the more hands-on, connect the strategy piece to the execution piece. That's where we like to talk about that. So I would say that I wouldn't want to be pure play strategy or pure play execution. I really like that let's go understand where are the levers and opportunities in this business organization, and let's put our ability to execute them on the table. They don't have to execute with us, but it's not a pie in the sky wishful PDF PowerPoint presentation that good luck executing. This is like these are the parts of this plan that we feel very strongly we can help you with. Here are these other things that you might want to go, hire a Salesforce specialty shop or some other type of organization to help you with. But that's I think the other differentiation in those kind of things. And frankly, I think that's also part of the reason why occasionally we get called in to rescue a project from pure play strategy. But I still have utmost respect for the businesses that they have, and they do. Like, if I sound condescending to them, and not at all, I have utmost appreciation for the kind of work that they do.
Yeah, the joke I heard, another person in our portfolio who's in the tech services space said, "You're not going to lose your job if you hire McKinsey, but you might go bankrupt paying them," and that's mean. We all have friends at McKinsey, Bain, Boston Consulting, and they are just the sharpest, best, and the brightest. But I think one expression I've heard you say, I think it was at our annual meeting, you said, like, we are not PowerPoint deck producers. That's not our deal.
Yeah, it's definitely not our. We can do it, but it's just not what.
Yeah. I mean, your pitch to CTOs and technologists at your client companies is like the Rallyday pitch to founders like you. When you talk about that scar tissue, having to shut down a factory and send people home on a bus. I mean, the founders of Rallyday, the people at the top of Rallyday, we're all founders and CEOs, and that's our pitch. It's like, look, I don't just have empathy for what you're going through. I have respect for you choosing to go through it. And oh, by the way, I did too, and made a ton of mistakes along the way. And like there's a peer connection that is formed. You and I have it now because we've both had to make payroll, and that will be a bond that you and I have, even though from a technology standpoint, I'm quite primitive, but you and I have both had to look to see if we had enough cash and if we had enough cash to send the paychecks. And that's scary. And we've had to make decisions that are very difficult and been through the fire, and so I can understand why that's a compelling sales pitch compared to a McKinsey partner who might have had a relatively privileged educational experience through the Ivy League and so forth. So I get that, and I think that's one of the reasons that we were so attracted to you, Tony, and the Nimble Gravity story was we could identify with it just given our own kind of sales pitch, if you will.
Yeah, and vice versa. It was one of the things that stood out about Rallyday too.
Were you reluctant to get private equity capital?
There was not a eventual reluctance. It was a timing reluctance. It was a question of not if but when. Yeah, it was just, at what point does it make sense to jump in? It was always part of the plan from a how do you continue to scale and grow perspective. And we've been fortunate to be able to work alongside PE in the work that we do to at least observe how that works a bit. So that was helpful. But yeah, it was always part of the plan. Just took a little bit to get to the point where we wanted to do it. And the other thing that happened was we were in the middle of our second acquisition and we wanted to close that. So that, so there were some of these sort of timing features in the way we did this.
Yeah, I remember because you started talking to us a couple years ago, and you were more recently closing on your Columbia acquisition, I think it was. So that made a lot of sense. All right, I've got you in the office. You're a thought leader in AI. I'd be stupid not to bring this topic up, which is like, what is going on? I mean, on a given morning, I read a lot in the morning before work, and I'm a curious fellow, and I've been trying to learn about AI's impact on the world, probably more from the comparing it to other advances that we have had socioeconomically over time. And, there's some days where I'm like, wow, this is going to change the world dramatically and quickly. And other days I feel like maybe there's a little hype going on. Where are you on the spectrum, Tony? And give us a little insight on where we've been and where we're going and how quickly all this is going to happen and what will the effect be on business and society more broadly. And I know that's a huge freaking question.
I love it. I like questions. Can I answer that in the reverse order?
Fantastic.
Okay. So I think there's this future state where TBD on the timing, but I think we're in the mode where everyone becomes a supervisor and they have infinite capacity of interns or junior resources to supervise. And those resources, particularly in probably the 5 to 10 year horizon, are really good at information worker tasks. They're not going to be great at, non-information worker kind of things in that time horizon, likely, but they're going to be really good at processing emails and documents and, these types of things. And the other thing that happens in that, like everyone's a supervisor model, is that any business that is charging by person hour has to change their business model. Because if I send something to my accountant or my tax folks or whatever, and they're charging X dollars per hour, and all of a sudden it takes them 4 minutes to do everything that used to take them a week to do. If they're charging by the hour, they now have to sell several hundred times more work to just tread water. So I think there's this other side of what's happening that is just completely disrupting the charge model and the economics and so forth. And I think that those two factors are going to be the primary driver and maybe the governor, the handbrake a little bit on the speed at which that gets implemented. I think that's sort of like the 5-year-ish kind of vision. And frankly, that's also a big chunk of our business is by person hour. And so if all of a sudden we're twice as efficient as we were before, we have to sell twice as much. So there's some like big tectonic things that are going to happen. Now, today we're in this mode of like, there's a lot of confusion and weird studies and MIT reports claiming things that aren't actually probably even, in my opinion, MIT reports. And so the reality on the ground is the laws of how to make technology work in a business for value haven't changed. Like, if we're putting in place technology that automates something, what is the benefit of doing that? Well, you have to make sure it gets deployed. And did you think about change management and these kind of things? So, like for example, if Rallyday says we spend 4 hours a week processing NDAs and like the mundane aspects of emailing them and tracking status and all this sort of stuff, could AI automate that for you? Yes, for sure. Is it going to like cut the 4 hours to 10 minutes? Probably yes. Is there really an ROI in that? Is it the biggest thing that you need to do? So that's gonna be the thing that ends up driving. Yeah, I think the like on the other side of this, there's this investment happening in AI, and the level of investment, like multiples of GDP sort of thing. Or like I think the stat was something like, if you subtract all the data center spend and so like it was a flat year basically. I think either that's happening with like clear understanding that the value creation or the cost reduction must happen because otherwise it makes no sense whatsoever, or it's happening because there's so much hype and excitement that people just don't want to be left out. And I think the reality is probably somewhere in the middle. That's the unfortunate situation, as I think a lot of what's being spent today at the data center, at the infrastructure level, is the capitalization of that stuff is 3 years maybe lifespan. Starts to in a couple of years look very interesting if whether we actually got that much economic value for that equipment. And
Yeah, I mean, the valuation question everyone's asking is that CapEx or is that part of your P&L and on the L side? And the life cycle of the either computing power in those centers or the delivery of that computing power probably depreciates in a much shorter time frame than bricks and mortar, right? So I mean, but I would say on the plus side, from my perspective, what a gift that capital allocators are giving firms like Nimble Gravity, which is a massive amount of infrastructure that they're creating virtually overnight. They're the ones that are probably going to have the difficulty sustaining the profitability of that in-place infrastructure, and you get all the potential power of it to deploy with clients to create expense reduction and more profitability, all else being equal within your clients. It's a golden time to be doing what Nimble Gravity does, in my opinion.
100%. Yeah, I think the consumption, the ROI comes from the consumption of this, which comes from the services. Yes, it is the tailwind for us, for sure. I also think that let's think about, why does an ERP system need to exist? It exists so that a human can go create a purchase order, an invoice, etc., That's why they exist. And there's lots of, the screen for the intercompany transfer needs to look this way. So I think there's this, this overall wave of change that will happen to ERPs, to SaaS companies, and all of that is going to be driven fundamentally by the implementation of AI and services is what's going to do that. So yeah, super exciting. We're lucky to be doing what we're doing at the time we're doing it.
Yeah, I've shared with friends like at a philosophical level, what a wonderful time to be alive. I'm glad that I got to see this. To me, it's just a fascinating era that we get to live in, and with Nimble Gravity, we get to be part of here at Rallyday. And let's go through quickly your one use case where you're like, we nailed it. And what was the economic value add that you provided? Let's do that real quick, and then I want to end with maybe some of Tony's dreams for the business and personally.
It's tough to come to just one use case to talk about. There's so many that.
Well, obviously, we got confidentiality and all that stuff.
Yeah. I'll choose one that I really like because of how simplistic it is. And so we work with a very, very seasonal business that sells ice. And as you might imagine, ice is mostly between like May and September. And to handle the convenience stores and grocery stores ordering ice, this particular company hires 30 seasonal workers between May and September just to handle calls and emails and all these sorts of things. So if you think about one of the really like most straightforward, logical use cases that lots of companies have, it's customer service, customer support. So an email comes in, the AI asks the question of the email effectively, is there enough information in this email to know how much ice and where is it going? And is there an open account that I can charge this to? If not, automatically reply with a nice email requesting the missing information. If so, if it's complete, just add it to the order entry system. No human ever has to see this. The customers that gets these emails get a really nice professional email. None of the like onboarding training to teach people how to go look in the systems ever needed to happen. It just works. So that kind of use case. Same with the audit, like IVR phone tree. Press 1 for this. Press 2. Just say the order, and we take the audio to text to the language model. Language model interprets that into an order, puts it into the order entry system. So those kind of cases, because language models are trained on language and email and voice are language, they do really, really well at those kind of.
And like, how much did that client save, the ice company?
They're saving $2 million a year forever based on that, and they they can scale effectively infinitely without having to add any heads on that whole service. So that's and by the way, that also means that if you ever wanted to change the order entry system, it's a few lines of code. It's no longer this whole retraining exercise or this whole change to the way things work. So it's been super fun to do those kind of things. And I think that project from kickoff to go live was 6 weeks. So imagine the ability to achieve that kind of and the other thing that was really fun about that kind of project, one of the things that happens with that business is if you don't finish all the systems testing before May, it's really hard to turn these things on because they're busy. It's all just in the warm months. So you do, during the winter months, you do all the work and create the systems and test them, and then it's like every day is your Black Friday kind of thing. So we had this immovable date of when it had to go live in early May. So anyway, those kind of things are super fun, partially because they're just like easy to explain and simple, and and they apply to so many businesses.
Yeah,
to be
you
able to
can
do.
easily extrapolate that to other industries. Okay, so you're snowboarding. Oh, what's your favorite ski area?
In the world, it's Revelstoke. I'm sure you've been there. It's a wonderful place. Here in Colorado, I'm a big fan of Mary Jane Winter Park. I love it's home mountain, but it's hard to choose.
That's where I grew up. I grew up in Granby, and we skied at Winter Park when I was a kid. And that's where my mom and dad raised us. In fact, the ski area raised me in many ways. So
Yeah, it's a great place.
the coffee and tea market is pretty solid. I'm sure we've been there at the same time if that was where you grew up. What do you dream about now, Tony? I mean, you've kind of worked your way up through the world and you emerged as top of the heap at a really large multi-billion dollar business, head of technology, and then started Nimble Gravity, did the Fog Solutions deal in July. You've got a private equity partner. You have, I think, one child today.
Hard to call her a child. She just turned 20.
Oh God. Well, still your child,
Oh yes.
but not a child. I mean, like you've kind of done it all. Do you find yourself wondering what that next mountain is and what will be a satisfactory outcome of your journey? Like, how do you measure yourself now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I tend to think about it in a few dimensions, right? One is how many interesting, wonderful jobs do we create for people in the world? And that, seeing people, whether they're, later in their career or their first job, super fun. And just, that's one. Second one is like being part of a giant transformation, probably the biggest transformation of my lifetime. That's pretty incredible. Like I just get so jazzed about every day helping companies understand and implement and use this stuff. I think that's the second one. And I think we started this mission with an idea. We're going to build a $100 million consulting business. I think probably at this point we didn't set the bar high enough, and we need to think about the next. But it's a great group of people I get to work with every day. So we're going to keep doing this and having fun, and that's that's what drives me. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I like to think that you get a certain kick out of defying gravity. I can see you on a snowboard doing that. I can see you on a mountain bike doing that. And strangely, I can see the same thrill on your face on a stupid conference call or a Zoom with a client where you're like, oh, yeah, we can do that. No problem.
Yeah. Today we had this call with a company that is interested in understanding what companies do based on what's on their website. And, like we understand that some business data company calls you this sort of company, but like there's more nuance to the world. I'm like, it's really fun when like some of these come back up. Like that's not the first time I've heard that. It's not the first time we're going to help a company do that. It's just fun. It's great. I think about it as like we are bringing. It's like fire, and we're like, hey, we're going to teach you how to rub these two stones together, and how to harness it so it doesn't kill you. It's at that level of change, and it's been really fun to be part of that.
God, that is such a striking, no pun intended, metaphor. Gives me goosebumps. All right, let's give you a chance to give some thank yous, maybe some shout outs to colleagues, partners, clients, people that believed in you, mom, dad, whoever, like 3 to 5 people. Who do you want to thank?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the people I get to work with every day, in particular, I think Joe Ackert, who was one of the first people to say, let's go do this. And that was awesome. Good to have the push there. I had a physics teacher in like 9th grade. His name is Lucky Ditton, and
Cool name.
Super cool guy. He really like probably pushed me to be okay being smart, I think was the thing. And I'm a super humble person, but he was somebody that's like, it's okay. You don't have to be ashamed. And that guy, and Patrick in Rallyday, that guy is like a super special guy, and he was, it was partially his persistence that led us to this conversation today. And I also like I have to thank my wife because she is the most patient person to, there have been months and months where I haven't seen her and she's somehow okay with that, and just been a wonderful partner through this whole thing.
That's a great way to end. And I'm struck by all the founders that we get to work with and, their recognition that like their partners at home deal with a lot of shit. I have an expression, the only thing worse than being a founder is being a founder's partner. The lonely, if you think CEO job is lonely, be the wife or husband of a CEO. And I love it when people are unabashed about thanking them, and I don't think we do it enough. So thanks for being a great role model in that regard, Tony. Thanks for your leadership, both of the revolution that's afoot on behalf of future generations and also clearly the clients that you serve. It's been fun year together. It's been fun to watch you on the field fight every day. And the feeling that we have of being by your side at Rally Day, we feel like we have to earn that every day. And it's very rewarding to earn it with such a force of nature, and we take that very seriously and feel a certain amount of privilege that you've let us into your life and let us help you build the business of your dreams. And it's a real sacred relationship. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. And it's been a great partnership. We genuinely cherish it.
Thanks, Tony.